Right, before we begin, I'll do a quick recap of what we covered as an introduction last week. Right, last week we talked a little bit about the famous Austrian monk called Gregor Mendel. His name you must know. He is the founding father of mathematics, and I highly respect him. Today we're going to watch a quick video as a quick recap before we dive into reading some pigeons. Okay? Some terms we'll be recapping because these are the terms you'll be using in this chapter. Words like dominant, recessive, right? Alleles, genes.
These days, scientists know how you inherit characteristics from your parents. They're able to calculate probabilities of having a specific trait and getting a trait information
Why are you laughing? This is not sibling, huh?
Oh, not siblings.
It's not what? Father, mother, then two kids, then these people appear separately. Yeah, it's not that they give birth to 4 kids, then they make some more. Yeah? You know watch again, huh? Okay, then we just came from the chapter of repro. So you all know, it's not 1 kiss, then kids come out.
These days, scientists know how you inherit characteristics from your parents. They're able to calculate probabilities of having a specific trait and getting a genetic disease according to the information they have from the parents and the family history. But how is this possible? To understand how traits pass from one living being to its descendants, we need to go back in time to the 19th century and a man named Gregor Mendel. Mendel was an Austrian monk and biologist who loved to remove plants. By breeding the pea plants he was growing in the monastery's garden, he discovered the principles that rule heredity. In one of the most classic examples, Mendel combined the purebred yellow-seeded plant with a purebred green-seeded plant, and he got only yellow seeds. He called the yellow color trait the dominant one because it was expressed in all the new seeds. Then he let the new yellow-seeded hybrid plants self-fertilize, and in this second generation he got both yellow and green seeds, which meant that the green trait had been hidden by the dominant yellow. He called this hidden trait the recessive trait. From those results, Mendel inferred that each trait depends on a pair of factors, one of them coming from the mother and the other from the father. Now we know that these factors are called alleles and represent the different variations of the gene. Depending on which type of allele Mendel found in each seed, we can have what we call a homozygous pea, where both alleles are identical, and what we call a heterozygous pea, when the two alleles are different. This combination of alleles is known as genotype, and its result, being yellow or green, is called phenotype. To clearly visualize how alleles are distributed amongst descendants, we can use a diagram called the Punnett square. You just place the different alleles on both axes, and then you figure out the possible combinations. Let's look at Mendel's peas for example. Let's write the dominant yellow allele as an uppercase Y, and the recessive green allele as a lowercase y. The uppercase Y always overpowers the lowercase spread, so the only time you get green babies is if you have 2 lowercase y's. In Mendel's first generation, the yellow homozygous pea mom will give each pea kid a yellow dominant allele, and the green homozygous pea dad will give a green recessive allele, so all the pea kids will be yellow heterozygous. Then, in the second generation, where the 2 heterozygous kids marry, their babies could have any of the 3 possible genotypes, showing the 2 possible phenotypes in a 3-to-1 proportion. But even peas have a lot of characteristics. For example, besides being yellow or green, peas may be round or wrinkled. So we could have all these possible combinations: round yellow peas, round green peas, wrinkled yellow peas, and wrinkled green peas. To calculate the proportions for each genotype and phenotype, we can use a Punnett square too. Of course, this will make it a little more complex. And lots of things are more complicated than peas, like, say, people. These days, scientists know a lot more about genetics and heredity, and there are many other ways in which some characteristics are inherited, but it all started with Mendel and his peas.
Okay, before we dive into breeding pigeons, some vocabulary I'd like you to get familiar with so that you can understand this chapter holistically. First and foremost, you have seen the word dominant. You have also seen the word recessive. When do you use these terms? You use these terms to describe an allele, okay, or a trait. Okay, I'll give you an example. For example, in the key example, capital Y is used to represent the dominant allele. Okay, allele. Small caps Y was used to represent the recessive allele. So we attach the word dominant or recessive in front of the word allele. Yeah? Next, you have encountered two new words introduced to you today. Yeah, you saw the word homozygous. Sorry, a lot more words. 4 new words. Homozygous, heterozygous. You have seen the word genotype and phenotype. I'd like to elaborate what all these terms mean. First and foremost, what is the difference between a genotype and a phenotype? When we look at genotypes, we are referring to the combination of alleles. So I give you an example. There are 3 possible genotypes, right? Genotype number 1 is if you have 2 capital Y's. Genotype number 2 is if you have 2 small y's. Genotype number 3 is if you have a big Y and a small y. There are 3 different genotypes you can possibly have. Genotype simply refers to the combination of the alleles. Genotypes are not things you can see because they are in your genes, they are in your cells. But you can tell what a person's genotype may be by seeing what appears on the surface. And that's what phenotype is. Phenotype is the observable trait that is a result of the genotype. What does this mean? If these are the possible genotypes, what are the possible phenotypes that can arise from these genotypes? Yellow. Yellow is one phenotype that could appear. So phenotype is what's a physical characteristic that you appear on the surface. Right? Green is another possible phenotype. The phenotype that will appear from this genotype is yellow. So all in all, there are 2 different phenotypes. The challenge of solving puzzles and mysteries in this chapter is about finding out what the genotype is if you are only given a phenotype. Because if I were to cover this up and I pass you a yellow pea and I ask you, what do you think is the genotype of this pea? How are you going to solve this mystery? Because in truth, there are 2 different genotypes that can result in yellow. So the skill here is that we'll find ways to solve these mysteries. In this chapter, I do not really need you to memorize anything. Instead, you must be able to use these terms, dominant, recessive, homozygous, heterozygous, genotype, phenotype, in explaining how you solve these mysteries. Okay, so we'll pause a while here. These are the 6 vocabulary that we would like to be using quite often today. Vocabulary. Any questions so far on how you might use these words? Yes, question?
What is the difference between the homozygous and heterozygous?
Hey, did I actually explain? I didn't, right? I just wrote it on the board, right? Okay. So, the word homo means same. Hetero means different. So we use the word homozygous or heterozygous to describe genotypes. I'll give you an example. This individual here is homozygous. Yeah? Who else is homozygous? This one is also homozygous. And this is an example of a heterozygous genotype. If you want to be specific to whoever you're telling this to, you can even add one more layer. You can say that this individual is homozygous for the dominant allele. So we can say this person has a homozygous dominant genotype. This person is a homozygous recessive genotype. This person has a heterozygous genotype. Because hetero just means you have two versions of it. And this is how I will make use of the vocabulary. I'll try my best to use the vocabulary properly in the way I speak. Right? And whenever possible, I will write it out in a sentence also if you want to see how it's used. We don't use the word homozygous or heterozygous to describe phenotypes. Yeah? It can only be used. Yeah. It can only be used to describe genotypes, the combinations. And this is the foundation for what we're going to do with the pigeons today. What pigeons? Okay, let's go out and grab some. Have you tasted pigeons before?
I think I tasted one.
How?
It tastes like chicken.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. For today, let's play a little bit of this game called Pigeonetics. If you go to SLS, you go to tab 2, you will find a QR code which you can access. Alternatively, on your iPad, you can click on this link, go to the Pigeonetics game. And this is what you will see. We will play level 1 to level 5. You can play level 6 onwards yourself once you get the foundation of the basics of genetics. Level 1 to 5 gives you a flavor, helps you make sense of these 6 terms on the whiteboard. Okay, when you are at the game page, don't play yet. Okay, we play together. Okay, when it comes to the playing part, then you start mating them. Very fast in the mating process, egg will kill almost instantly. Okay, as you are gradually getting into the game, I will start the game first, so that we get a little bit of intro into this game. I love this game, it's called Pigeonetics. There are many levels, 20 plus levels. Yeah, but you play level 1 to 5 is just the foundation. 6, I play up to, I think I only play up to like maybe 15, 18. Yeah, because it gets harder and harder. For us, the good news is that the genetics that we are going to learn for JH4, up to level 5 is sufficient. Level 6 onwards are things that your SH seniors will learn, university onwards. Yes? You say what? It's not luck based, it's puzzle based. Yeah, you have to figure out which two parents are the best parents to name so they can get exactly this child you want. Okay, but I tell you in real life not like that, alright? Okay, in real life it's not like that. Okay, let's begin.
You've probably seen this guy before. Maybe up on a wire or flying around town with about 100 of his friends. It's a pigeon, or more properly, a domestic rock pigeon. Domestic rock pigeons come in different colors, patterns, shapes, and sizes. In all, there are over 350 breeds. People like to breed pigeons with specific combinations of characteristics. Pigeon fanciers show their birds at fairs. They fly their birds in races where the winners earn $1 million prizes. Some even write books. The first thing you need to know about pigeon breeding is that, just like people, pigeons can be male or female.
Okay, so the first 2 levels, we're going to learn how to breed male or female pigeons. Okay? The interesting thing
Sex
about
is determined by sex chromosomes. In people, people, they're X and Y. In pigeons, they're Z and W.
Right, you all know? For males, we are XY, females, XX, right? Pigeons are slightly different. Okay? Oh, why? Oh, why? From my understanding, will still develop a male, but I think a little bit off. Or the baby may not develop fully. So, yeah. Okay, so, yeah. Oh, no, not die. I don't think they will grow. I think some of the functions of the body may not be so, may not function properly.
Oh, okay.
Okay, alright, so I'd like you to understand that we look at gender, whether it be in humans or in pigeons, we're not exactly working with dominant or recessive. Yeah, it's in the entire chromosome X and Y.
Your first puzzle is with a female pigeon.
Okay, so here's the first puzzle. May I get everyone to try puzzle 1 and 2? I'd like you to complete the first 2 puzzles to try to breed. First task, a female pigeon. After that, we invite someone up to breed a female pigeon. Have you all done already? Very fast. If you click on the pigeon, they will show you what chromosomes are present, whether it's the Z or the W chromosome. Okay, actually I think the game is easy enough. I will meet you back at level 5. Okay? I'd like you to complete all the way to level 5 yourself, solve the puzzles, and we'll come back and share what we've learned from the puzzles. To get maximum points, you need to breed as little pigeons as possible. for one question. Can you tell which crest is the dominant allele? Like, is it crest or no crest?
No crest.
Okay, as you play the game, what evidence do you have for it?
No, they said it themselves.
Then they got say,
Oh, they got say
Yeah.
Okay, but if they don't say, can you tell? No?
I'll
That's
just
why
like
if you put them two together,
There you go.
useful. If you put like one non-crest.
You're done at level 5? Sure, you can go on to level 6. What you want, you can don't go very far, yeah? Pretty sure you haven't gone to play.
We'll just restart as a whole. Or you just restart as a whole. What about yours on the phone?
But you got to see them.
Oh wait, there is a crash here. Live. Oh wait, those two are. Yeah.
Normally, as you play this, do you know which allele is the dominant option?
I ask you.
Okay, how you tell?
Oh wait, yes, I am. My eyesight. I can't believe my
Okay, so we
eyesight.
look at all the genotypes. This is heterozygous. Yes, we look at the heterozygous.
Okay, let's see. Alright.
Is he showing crest? So what does that look like? Right. Yeah. So usually that's how we will solve mysteries. We look at the person, the patient's phenotype, right? And then if we know the genotype, right, we can already guess which one is the dominant. So if this is what you see on the surface, then the low crest is dominant. But let's say in an alternate four dimensions, crest shows on the surface. That means crest is when it's in a matrix. Yeah, so usually we'll look at heterozygous
No, there's no difference. There's literally no difference.
So actually then you have so you want someone with crest, right? Crest is recessive. That means the only way you can get crest to show on the surface is alright. The genotype is both homozygous.
Why do I feel like it didn't work? Because I always feel like I always walk it after the second time. Last time all along.
So that's how that's the logic of the dominant and By degree of which level? Oh, okay. Okay lah, at least you have Yes.
So that's why I was asking.
What?
But then that one I go by 3 instead of plus. That's what I mean.
But if you don't want to reset, you just want to replay the code, right? You just do
But I think we got lucky. We got lucky. My highest was 7.
Okay, everyone got a chance to play up to level 5? Anyone is not play up to level 5?
Mine crashed at like level 4.
4, okay, 4 good enough, 4 good enough.
No, we crashed at level 5. We never finished.
Okay, so I'm going to play through 1 to 5 as together. I need your help lah. You tell me which pigeons to put together in the same cage. Okay? Alright, so I want a female pigeon. Hey, no choice, I only have 2 pigeons here to make. Okay, but we know that these 2 pairing of chromosomes will lead to a male. This will lead to a female. So if I want a female baby, I will take Z plus W. Okay? After you hatch a female. So the first few stages are quite simple, right? Because it's all about gender. This stage is just getting you to practice so that you can recognize the genders as you go on later. So if I want a male, I'll just do the opposite. Later on, this is where it gets interesting.
To be good, you need to know how to pair birds to get offspring with just the right combination of characteristics. You need to know a lot about genetics. Inherited characteristics, like whether a pigeon has a crest or not, are the products of genes. Genes pass from parents through eggs and sperm to offspring. For most genes, offspring inherit 2 copies, one from each parent. The 2 copies can be the same, or they can be different. Different versions of the same gene are called alleles. The allele combination for a particular gene is called a genotype. The 2 alleles work together to make what we see, what scientists call a phenotype.
Alright. I'm going to teach you a skill. Right? If someone were to ask you, right, let's say the game or the puzzle in the exam does not tell you which allele, crest or no crest, is the dominant. Can you tell which is the dominant? Actually,
there can only be one answer.
if we don't tell you if we do not tell you which is dominant, from the pigeons' phenotypes and their genotypes, can you tell which is dominant? Quadratic curve. Okay. Okay, then I ask you, if you want to find out what is the dominant allele, should you be looking at homozygous pigeons or heterozygous pigeons? Okay, then we look at heterozygous pigeons. What information will tell you whether it is dominant or recessive? So let's look at, the only hetero one is this pigeon, right? This pigeon here has a heterozygous genotype. No crest and crest. What is the pigeon's phenotype? No crest, right? So what does this imply about the no crest allele? Okay, so this is the skill to pick up. Okay? In exams or in questions in your papers, right, when we solve puzzles, we may not tell you which is the dominant allele. So we will show you the characteristic, then we will show you the genotype, and you can follow. Okay? So this chapter is really about solving puzzles. Alright? And if you enjoy solving puzzles, then this is a chapter for you. I have to tell you, when I was your age, I'm those kind of bio student where I enjoy memorizing. And I didn't like solving puzzles. So when I come to these questions, right, I actually just skip them. I don't know why I'll do that. So 10 marks usually the exam, right, will be 8 to 10 marks solve puzzles. I'll just skip, I'll just leave it blank. I'm that kind of student. There are only many years later that I realized actually it's very fun to solve these puzzles. Don't even need memory work. Yeah? Okay, so if you enjoy this, then that's what you're going to do this chapter. Okay, so if I want a male with no crest, can you tell me the kind of genotypes that you can have for no crest? Okay, assuming, let's say no crest is N. Since you say no crest is the dominant, right? And we say crest is small n. So as I do this, you pick up how I use the alphabets. Notice that when you want to depict something as dominant, you use capital. You want to depict something as recessive, you use small caps. Okay, so I'll ask you, what are the possible genotypes for no crest? Am I right? So for something that is no crest on the surface, you can either adopt a heterozygous, or you could adopt a homozygous dominant. That means to say there are a few different kinds of babies you can make. Correct? So there are several ways to solve this puzzle. How will you solve this puzzle? I assume you all have played this already, right? Okay. Aziz, could you come up and choose two pictures of your choice? Which one? This one? Okay, plus? Which picture you want to make with? This one? Okay, so Aziz choose this picture and this picture. Since we want a male, that means it needs to be same chromosome. We have not much choice here. Will this result in a baby with no crest? Yeah, possible, right? Were there other parents that we could have used? Could we? So rather than, okay, let's do another. Could we have used this female? Possible? What could we have done? We could have chosen this also, right? Still would have resulted in a no crest baby, right? Okay, so there are many different parents you could have used. The key is to know what kind of baby you want. So let's hatch this baby. Woohoo! Right? You get 3 eggs if you use very few parents. Yes?
Wait, but then like in the later stages, you need to make the two children mate with each other in order to get 3 stars.
Okay, is that a question or a statement?
Is that ethical?
Oh. That's a good question. Do you think it's ethical?
I mean, if you get 3 stars,
But I have to say, you know all the dog breeds they all have that are very, of a certain breed, golden retriever, all those breeds, actually in order to maintain all these characteristics, they tend to have to inbreed. Yeah, to maintain the characteristics. Because if you take a golden retriever, make a poodle, right? Then actually you will get a different, a dog with different characteristics from both parents, right? So how humans maintain all these different breeds is honestly there's a lot of inbreeding taking place. So you maintain the fur that you want, the length of body that you want. Yeah. So is that ethical? But yet a lot of us want certain breeds of dogs, right? Okay, next level. If we want a male with crest, we know that crest is a recessive. Which 2 parents should we choose? Right? Given that crest is a recessive allele, which 2 parents should we choose? Number 1, 2, 3, 4. Agreeable? First and third parent? Okay. We choose the first and the third parent, and we use which alleles? We have to use both the recessive alleles, right? You notice therefore, if you want the recessive trait to appear, you no choice have to be homozygous recessive. That's the only way. So male would be Z. Okay, then hatch. The levels onwards get tougher and tougher, but it makes use of roughly the same concepts. It just requires a lot more deducing. Okay? So this is the basics of genetics. For your fun and games, on the bus ride home, you could play a game like this. Recess time, you can play this game. Mr. Javita walk by, ask you why you're playing a game, say that it's for educational purposes. Yeah? Okay, so broadly, I hope that you can appreciate these 6 terms. As we move forward, we'll start to practice using them in words. Okay, so that's one objective of today, genetic vocabulary. The last thing we'll learn today is, how do we draw diagrams to solve puzzles? You go to SLS, you go to this section over here, click on offspring using genetic diagrams. We're now going to teach you how to draw a genetic diagram. This is something you must be very familiar with to solve puzzles. Can you see this in your SS? Okay. For you, what you see over here is a template, but you are expected to be able to reproduce this template to solve puzzles. Okay? So we start beginner's level. I provide you the template, and I provide you a lot of dotted blanks where you can input data. So, usually a puzzle may go something like that. The puzzle may go something like that. They'll provide a question, and then they'll say, a pigeon which is heterozygous for the crest gene mates with another pigeon which is also heterozygous for the crest gene. Then they'll ask you to calculate the probability of getting an offspring with a non-crested phenotype. Okay? Honestly, the fastest way to do this problem is to just draw this square. Correct? You can solve the puzzle really fast. Yeah? However, when you go to A levels, if they ask you to draw a genetic diagram, you have to draw what you see below over here to show the examiner that you understand the laws of genetics. But if it's in an MCQ question, and they give you this question, you just draw this square to solve the puzzle will do. Right? So I'm going to teach you how to draw this diagram, mainly because it's a way to show how alleles and genes are inherited. First and foremost, you must step one. You see at the very top, you must first define what your alleles are. For example, over here I wrote let N be the no crest allele. So that's step one. You must always define the symbols you're going to use. And let small n be the crest allele. After that, you see all those headers on the left hand side? Those are headers that you want to write down immediately. Then you start to fill in the blanks to solve the puzzle yourself. So, first thing you will do is to write parental generation, and you'll do a quick underline. Then you'll begin first with parental phenotype. Over here in these two blanks, I would like you to write in what the phenotypes of the parents are. So right now, you just download this image and you can start filling in the blanks. As a practice for drawing genetic diagrams. Okay, so let's extract information from the question. What is the parental phenotype? Parental means the parents that you are meeting with each other. Yeah? From the question, can you extract out what the parent phenotypes are? Will the parent be crested or no crest, given that they are heterozygous? So the first two blanks, the parent's phenotype, will be no crest and no crest. Okay, so in the row for parental phenotype, that's where we want to write down the observable characteristics of the parents. You must have this X over here. This X means that they mate with each other. Okay? The X means they mate with each other. In the next row, you will then show the examiner or whoever is reading your genetic diagram what the genotype of this parent is. So you write parental genotype, and as you can see over here, in the question they've written, I've already filled in the blanks for you, N. genetic diagram, you are then expected to draw two lines branching out from the genotype, then draw 4 circles. These 4 circles represent the gametes they are formed, meaning the sperm and eggs. What do these lines represent then? Actually, these lines represent the process of meiosis occurring. And when you do meiosis, you get the gametes. What are gametes? Gametes are the sperm and eggs. We've done a sample for you. So if we undergo meiosis, you will spread out the alleles into the sperm and egg. Right? So big N, small n. On this side, what will you fill in? Actually, it's the same thing, big N, small n. Everything in orange I'm writing are the things you fill in the blanks for. Everything in blue are the template that you will use for every time they ask you to draw a genetic diagram. Yes?
So for the first row, do we write anything?
Say again?
For the first row, do we write anything?
Oh, like this row over here?
Yeah.
No need to write anything. This is just a header for all the parent stuff. Yeah? Then you will see the next header appear. F1 generation. So from here onwards, everything we're writing below has to do with the babies. So F1 generation. You may be wondering what F1 means. Okay, it's not the race car. F1 means filial. You all heard the word filial piety? Filial means, I don't know if it's Latin or Greek, it means son. S-O-N. Or in other words, the child of. So when we write F1 generation, we are essentially saying in Latin, or is it Greek, the children generation. Okay? F1. Then you may be asking why you write F1. Because if you can technically go a second generation, you can write F2. You take the kids and make one more time, you'll be F3. So F1 just means the first generation of children that appear. Then you see a bunch of complicated lines. I'm going to teach you which lines you should draw first. Because even I get confused when I draw these lines. These lines just represent, not sex, represent mating. Okay, remember it represents fertilization between different gametes. Okay, so this is the order you want to draw the lines. From the first allele, you draw down one line and two lines. For the second allele, you draw down one line and two lines. This is how I start off. I'm going to use a different color so that you can visualize better. Let me use black. Then on the right hand side, you will draw down two lines branching out also. This gamete could fuse with this particular gamete. This gamete can also fuse with this gamete here. This gamete can fuse with this gamete too. And this gamete can also fuse with the next gamete on the extreme left. The purpose of drawing all these intersecting lines is to show you the possible combinations of alleles that can form. Truth be told, actually this rectangle is very useful already, right? So I always ask myself, why must you draw a genetic diagram with this rectangle? This square can serve the same purpose. Okay. My rationale for this is that when we first learn this chapter, drawing all this out helps us appreciate the processes a little bit more. Because when you draw these two lines appearing, actually it's meiosis taking place. When you draw these lines intersecting, it's sexual fertilization taking place. Has a little bit more value. That's why beginners always do this. But when you go to university level, nobody draws this anymore. People just use this square or two. Okay? So this is really a beginner level thing. So then, I would like you now to write down all the possible genotypes. Will you try out yourself? The F1 genotype of all the little babies that were born. The 4 different types of babies. Will you write it down? Yes. Sorry, say again. this big N can join with big N. It can also join with a small N.
So what do we do for the F1? F right below.
Like over here?
Yeah.
Oh, so I give you an example. If big N fertilizes this big N here, that means you'll get a genotype as NN. Yeah. If big N fertilizes small n, you will get this genotype here. So you fill in the remaining two. You understand your question?
Okay. I didn't know.
And if you are done with the genotype, can you now write the phenotype? Okay, you already know which ones are dominant, which is recessive. So you should be able to write down what the phenotype is. Can you write down what the corresponding phenotype is below? Is it no crest or crest? Okay, fill in the 4 blanks below. So this will be big N, small n. This will be small n, small n. If you want to double check whether you've done this correctly, what I do is I'll draw the square just to double check. Yeah, that's how I double check. Are you able to tell me the phenotypes? Yes, question? Okay, I get a couple. First one, big N, homozygous dominant. What is the phenotype of this baby? No crest. Okay, so no crest. What's the phenotype of this baby? No crest. What's the phenotype of this baby? No crest. Last baby? Crest. The last row that you write is called expected. Expected F1 phenotypic ratio. Okay. In this section here, you will write down what's the ratio of the phenotypes. So the ratio is 3:1. Yeah. Yes.
So isn't it always 3:1 if there's a recessive?
Okay. So it will always be 3:1 if you make two heterozygous. Make sense? Yeah. But it will not always be 3:1, right? Let's say if I were to make this with this. Will it be 3:1? It won't be already. Okay? Okay, so what's the ratio? 3:1, right? So what you could do is now, okay, so no crest, then you put dot dot crest, 3:1. Then the question normally will ask you to calculate the probability of getting one of the phenotypes. So what did they ask for? They say what's the probability of getting an offspring with no crest phenotype? So how do we calculate probability from ratio? 3/4. So how many percent is that? 75%. Okay? So that's how you calculate probability. Calculate from the ratio. 75%. If they ask you this question is an MCQ, don't bother to draw this out. Just draw the table will do. Then you can find out 75% also. Yeah?
If your math die, they only minus 1 after it.
Yeah. Yes.
Wait, so when we write the no crest, you write it the
You write in the expected F1 phenotype box. You write no crest and crest. Above the tree is present.
oh, so it's like below.
Yeah. Okay, so Megan asks, in this box over here you can write, therefore, no crest is to crest is 3:1. Okay, so you write in that box. This row over here is just a blank space. So you separate a little bit so it's easier to see. Yeah. If there's anything to really memorize, will be the template. Okay? But the puzzle will likely be different each time. But in truth, there are only 3 different puzzles you can encounter. Think about it. How many different kinds of parents can you meet together? I'll show you the 3 different kinds of parents. For example, you could make parents like that, right? You can make hetero and hetero. You can make homo and homo. Yeah? Or maybe 4 types. One last version of parent mating. Something like that. Wait, some more. Like that. Any more? Any other combination of parents you can work with? Have a night. Okay, so what will change? The only thing that will change therefore would be which parent meeting, as well as what is the trait we're working with. Won't be pigeon next time now. It could be a rat, it could be a plant, it could be a butterfly, it could be a flower. Yeah? Okay, will I see you tomorrow again? No, Friday. So this is my last lesson with you for this week. Okay, so as your homework, may I get you to draw a genetic diagram for question 3. The question has been provided for you to solve. So can you draw a genetic diagram and upload it here? Next lesson I see you, we will showcase people's genetic diagrams. Then we will see where we can improve on together. Okay? That's all. Okay, that's all. I guess I will see you on Friday.